Good morning, brothers and sisters. My name is Chukwemeka with the Igbo Hebrews. These are the Igbo people who have realized that the Igbos are the true Hebrews of the Bible, and we have returned to the worship of our God. We have left Christianity. We do not practice Judaism. We have nothing to do with Islam. We return to the worship of the one true God of the Bible, because the God of the Bible is not in any of these religions. Brothers and sisters, as you know, my channel is dedicated to reminding the tribes of Jacob that we, the Igbo people, we are the true people of the Bible. That is my life dedication. That is what I've made my life responsibility to do. And more importantly, this channel is also dedicated to reminding the Igbo people that we are the people of the Bible, but we are not Jewish people, because the Jewish people are not the people of the Bible. Well, not this Bible, maybe they have their own Bible, but they are not the children of Jacob. So this is what we are doing in this channel. Today we're talking about the feast in Igbo land. The feast in Igbo land, and I'll show you the biblical connotations of these feasts in Igbo land. In Igbo land, now, children of the Most High, the feast I'm going to mention here that we celebrate in Igbo land, a lot of us have been told that these are idol worship. And in all fairness, a lot of idol worship has come into it. Like I mentioned, most of the things we do today in Igbo land, is being done to idols. But if you look at them, if you take a very detailed look at them, you find that there was nothing idol worship originally with them. The masquerades and all these idols you see in your communities today were not there before. Most of the masquerade you have in your villages today, people can still tell you when it was brought in. You see, some village can bring a particular masquerade, then the next village will copy it, the other village will copy it, and so on and so forth. That's how. You see, children of God, the fact that something is being done in your community, done by the elders, and the elders say they were doing it when they were children, does not necessarily mean that that is what it used to be some 300 or 400 years ago. Okay, when our community was open to the neighboring community around us, or to the white men, the colonial masters and the rest of them, a whole lot of things were brought in, and a whole lot of things changed. This masquerades and idol worship, or what we call alosi, even from the etymology, from the word alosi, you will know that this is an abomination. It means abomination. That means it was never practiced in Igbo land before. It was actually brought in. Today we have dozens of alosi almost in all villages. Most villages have like 10 or 20. But it does not mean that they were there originally. I'll give you one very prominent example. Most of you have heard of Dr. Sebi. Dr. Sebi, who died recently, may the Most High bless his soul. When he died, when he was alive, he was mentioning that gari we eat in Nigeria, that is not originally an African food. It was actually brought here by the white man. Most people will not know. Most of us here in Africa, in Nigeria, we eat gari. We think that that's native food, but it's really not. When I heard it from Dr. Sebi, I was shocked, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? Gari? I thought gari is Nigerian, but it's not actually. Gari is not. The food that we call gari was actually brought here to us. Our ancestors were never eating gari before. So I called my father, I called my grandmother, and my father said, my father is about 60 something years old. My father is like 65. My father said he still remembers when he first saw gari. He was like 15 years old in our community. Okay, so but anybody who's listening to this, when you tell any African person, any Nigerian person that gari is not an African dish, they would in fact they will actually go to war trying to prove you wrong. But it's true, it's not. Those things were brought. So the fact that you have masquerades running around in your communities does not really mean that that's what your ancestors 300 or 400 years ago did. Most of those things were brought, and in the case of alosi, or idols and masquerade, you can clearly see the origin of these things, that they actually were brought in to your communities. It's out to you. Okay, let's start. In Igbo land, at the beginning of the year, and again, like I said, any Igbo person, please call someone in the village and ask them these things I'm saying. Prove it to yourself. Okay. In Igbo land, at the beginning of the year, they have the first feast that I usually have is called Ibankwa. Ibankwa. Then after that, they have another feast about 1 or 2 months later after Ibankwa. They have another feast that is called Onomblauko. Then after that, they have another feast that is called Iwaji or Alomo. That's what they call the New Yam Festival. And after that, the last feast of the year is what they call Onwa Asatom. That's usually the last feast of the year. Now, these are the 4 feasts I've mentioned. This feast is usually celebrated among all Igbo villages. Now, different Igbo villages have their own feast that they celebrate. For instance, in Ogidi, they celebrate Nwafo feast, which other people do not celebrate, only them. So different people have their own particular feast. But this 4 feast is peculiar to almost all Igbo villages. They have this feast in one way or the other, in addition to other ones that they celebrate. Now, these 4 feasts I've mentioned to you today, I want to show you what they mean in the Bible. Let's start with the first one in the year. It's called Ibankwa. Ibankwa is celebrated in the 2nd month. In Igbo, 2nd Igbo month. That's when it's usually celebrated. Again, the day of celebration can differ from people to people. But the 2nd month is usually when you go to plant things. They call it, when you go planting things in the farm, they call it ele in my dialect. That's, when it's a time of scarcity because you're planting things, you don't have harvest. Okay, that's when you celebrate the feast of Ibankwa. Okay, it depends on which community you celebrate it. Ibankwa can last between 1 day and 7 days. It depends on the community you're celebrating it. But that is the feast of Ibankwa. Now, let's look at the word Ibankwa. What does Ibankwa mean? Iba means to celebrate in Igbo land. For instance, they say Iba Egu means to dance, celebration. Or Ibanku means to celebrate the drink. That's traditional wedding, Igbo wedding. So Iba is a celebration. It's a verb that describes celebration, to celebrate. Nkwa means the promise. So the feast that is called the Ibankwa in Igbo land means to celebrate the promise. That is what it means. Ibankwa, brothers and sisters, is called to celebrate the promise. Now let's go to the Bible and let me show you where this is done. Okay, so children of God, like I said, the first feast we celebrate in Igbo land, in most Igbo villages, is called Ibankwa. Okay, let's go. Like I mentioned, Ibankwa means to celebrate the promise. Let's go to the Bible. Let's see that. We're going to the book of Exodus in chapter 12. In the book of Exodus, where we talk about where the Most High commanded our ancestors to celebrate the feast that is called Passover. In chapter 12, we start from verse 25 to 27. Exodus 12, 25 to 27, it said, "And it shall come to pass, when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he had promised, that you shall keep this service." Again, Moses was telling our ancestors how to celebrate the feast of Passover, the feast that remembers the promise that the Most High promised our ancestors, the land of our inheritance. It is that feast. He said, "And it shall come to pass, when you become to the land which the Lord will give you, according as he had promised, that ye shall keep this service," that's this feast. "And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, What mean you by this service? You shall say, It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses. And the people bowed their head and worshipped." So this feast, Ibankwa, in Igbo land, again, we did not make up the name of this feast like last week. This is the name of the feast that our ancestors passed down to us. The name of that feast means Ibankwa. What does Ibankwa mean? Any Igbo person will tell you that Ibankwa means to celebrate the promise. And you see that here, That promise is the promise that the Most High made to give us the land of our inheritance. That is the feast that we celebrate. Now, brothers and sisters, when do we celebrate this feast? We celebrate this feast in the first month, which is the second moon. The exact same time that it's celebrated in the Bible. That's when we celebrate it. Not only that, what do we use to celebrate this feast? In most communities, it depends on what you do, but we make the unleavened bread in Igbo land, which is called achicha. Achicha is the meal that is usually eaten when you go planting things. It's called elele. That's what we. That's when you go planting things. When it's a time of scarcity. That's when we celebrate this feast with achicha and with unkobi. Remember, I mentioned here clearly that the feast, the Passover meal, roasted goat head with bitter herbs, is the meal that we still eat in Igbo land, which is the meal that the Most High told us to eat on the Passover. It is still there. These are the things that we use to celebrate the feast of Igbo. Brothers and sisters, call your villages and find out. If you don't believe me, call your communities and find out what I'm saying today. Okay, we'll go to the next feast. The next feast that is being celebrated in Igbo land after Igbo, the next one we celebrate is called Onu Mbolo Akoko. Onu Mbolo Akoko. Now let's look at the word Onu Mbolo Akoko. According to what I was told in my communities, the old people in my communities, my grandmother and some other old people that I've discussed this thing with, they say that Onu Mbolo Akoko, the feast called Onu Mbolo Akoko, they celebrate it in the 3rd month or in the 4th month. It depends on how the month is being counted for that particular year. It's not a one. The way the Igbo calendar is, it depends on how it's being counted. Okay, but Onu Mbolo Akoko is celebrated in the 3rd or in the 4th month. Word. Let's look at the word Onu Mbolo Akoko. Now, Onu means mouth or beginnings or first in Igbo land. Okay, Mbolo Akoko means fruits. Mbolo Akoko, brothers and sisters, means fruits. So the feast in Igbo land that we celebrate that's called Onu Mbolo Akoko means first fruits. Brothers and sisters, go and you see, this is the reason I am convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that I am a descendant of Jacob. When you go to your communities and the people that they call idol worshippers tell you, look, these are the feasts we celebrate that is called Onu Mbolo Akoko, and you translate it to English, it becomes first fruits. These are the reason when I was told this by the people in my communities, I became fully convinced. If you combine this with other traditions that we have that are biblical, I became 190% convinced that I am a child of Jacob. If you don't believe me, brothers and sisters, call your communities today. Ask them this question. The reason I'm bringing out this video now is we are getting towards Christmas time. A lot of Igbo people will be traveling. They'll be going home. When you get home, brothers and sisters, ask questions. Those people that they call idol worshippers, those people that have been doing Omenani, those people that Christianity say you shouldn't talk to, go and talk to them. Ask them this question, they will tell you that. In different communities, they may have different names. I am from Anambra State. That's why I said in my community it's called Onu Mbolo Akoko. You can go and ask them. That name is still there. Go and ask people, brothers and sisters. Prove this to yourself now that some of these people are still alive and you can still interact with them and hear from them. We celebrate the feast of Onu Mbolo Akoko, which means first fruits. And we celebrate it in the 3rd or 4th month, which is exactly the same time that this feast is celebrated in the Bible. Brothers and sisters, this is why we are very convinced that we are the true people of the Bible. This is why. Okay, now that feast is celebrated in the 3rd month or in the 4th month in Igbo communities. It's called Onu Mbolo Akoko, which means first fruits. Translates to first fruits. Okay. Now, after that, we celebrate in Igbo land. The next feast that we have is Iwaji, or in some communities, like I showed you in Aguleri community, they call it Alomo. This community, this feast is called Iwaji or New Yam Festival. Almost every Igbo village celebrates this in one way or the other at different times. This feast is usually celebrated around September period. It's called Iwaji or New Yam Festival. I already have a video to show the biblical origins of the Feast of New Yam Festival. Please consult that video and see clearly that it's in the Bible. That's another feast that we celebrate in almost all Igbo villages celebrate this feast, Iwaji or New Yam Festival. And I have a video that shows that feast is clearly biblical. Go and look at it, brothers and sisters. Now, in most Igbo villages, the last feast I celebrated for the year, and that was like, according to my grandmother, she said that when she was growing up, that was the Christmas in Igbo community. It was like Christmas. That's the biggest feast we celebrate. It's the last of the year. Now, this feast is called Onwa Asato. Onwa Asato means the 8th month. That's what it means, translate. 8 months or 8th moon. Brothers and sisters, this is the feast that we call the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles is celebrated in the 7th month. The 7th month is the same as the 8th moon because the moon comes 30 days later. The first phase of the moon comes 30 days later. Take a look at the Hebrew calendar and you'll see it clearly. The feast is celebrated for a period of 1 week in Igbo land. 1 week, which is in Igbo calendar, is like 2 weeks, which is 8 days. Brothers and sisters, go and look at the Feast of Unleavened Bread. It's celebrated for that same period. I'm sorry, the Feast of Tabernacles is celebrated for that same period. 1 week. It is the feast. This Onwa Asato is common in Igbo land. In most Igbo villages celebrate Onwa Asato. And more importantly, like I mentioned, this feast is usually celebrated around around October period. When I was young, growing up, my birthday is in September, and then when I was a Christian, I used to observe my birthday. So I was very wary of this, that the feast Onwa Asato is celebrated around September-October period. Today in Igbo land, most villages like my village, they still celebrate Onwa Asato. However, they have moved it to December. The reason they moved it to December is that most Igbo people come back during December for Christmas celebration. So they moved the Onwa Asato to celebration so that the people that come back will partake in the feast and see masquerade and see other things. And the funny thing is that most of these people that come back are Christians, so they see this feast as idol worship. Brothers and sisters, this is not idol worship. That is the feast that we call the Feast of Tabernacles. The Feast of Tabernacles. That is Onwa Asato. Go and ask Christians when this feast is. The original time that this feast is celebrated is actually around October, which will synchronize with the 7th month in the biblical calendar. So, children of the Most High, in conclusion, I've given you 4 feasts. These 4 feasts are generally practiced by most Igbo communities in one way or the other. I started with Igbo. Igbo means to celebrate the promise, and I showed you in the Bible in Exodus chapter 12 verse 25 to 27 that feast is actually to celebrate the promise that the Most High made. Not only that, we call it the celebration of the promise. We celebrate that feast in the month that is celebrated in the Bible, and we eat the meal, unleavened bread and nkwobi. We eat the same meal that the Bible said that should be celebrated with. In Igbo land, we still do it today in Igbo land. You see, if it looks like a dog, quacks like a dog, and it's probably not a chicken, it's probably a dog. Okay. Now, I also mentioned Onum Blakoko. Onum Blakoko is the main reason, brothers and sisters, you may not believe this, but it's the main reason I believe personally that I am a child of Jacob. Because Onum Blakoko, the person that told me Onum Blakoko was actually my grandmother. Okay, we were having just a casual conversation. It didn't register when she mentioned that. She was like, okay, when we were young, again, like I mentioned, my grandmother is illiterate. She didn't go to school. She didn't read the Bible or read the Book of Jubilees or anything like that. So we were having a casual conversation, and she mentioned that when she was young, they used to celebrate Onum Blakoko. So a feast that they call Onumbulakoko. So you should just said it then, and it didn't register. It was later on, years later, that I started thinking about what she said. Thank the Most High, she's still alive. And I was like, Onumbulakoko. I mean, if I'm supposed to translate that to English, what will I call it? Onumbulakoko is simply first fruit. That's what it means. So I went back to her and we had that conversation, and she told me clearly. She said they celebrate that feast in the 3rd month, and it's actually celebrated for about a day. Each household, they do the celebration. They share meals among each other, and different communities celebrate it. And so I embarked on a mission. I started asking people in different communities that's around my village. And the old people, they remember the Feast of Onumbulakoko. In fact, one of them actually sat me down and explained this to me clearly, how that feast is being celebrated. Even much more in depth than my grandmother told me. Now, these people that I was asking, they were not Christians. These are people that Christianity will tell you that they are idol worshippers, don't go near them, that they will do you juju. But no, these are the people that sat down, and then what they were explaining to me were clearly in the Bible. And again, these are illiterates. They never read the Bible. They never went to church. So they were telling me that the feast that they celebrated when they were children or when they were very young was actually clearly in the Bible. I could see that clearly. So we live at a crossroad in history, brothers and sisters. You and I were living at a crossroad. We live at a time when the older people among us are dying off, and they are dying off with knowledge, information. We owe it to our future generation to tap those information and give it to our future generation to retain the knowledge that we are true children of Jacob. That's what we owe our future generation. And that is why I made it my responsibility to make these videos and put it out there. I know some of the things I say in these videos can get me arrested, or maybe, get me not liked by a number of people, especially those who are not Igbos. Even those who are Igbos, they tend to resent me because of these things. But it doesn't really mean I will document these things as much as I can, and you owe it to yourself to document this, at least prove the things I say. Go and confirm it from your communities, and also document that what's going on in your community, so that your future generation will be aware of that. So may the Most High bless each and every one of you. I am putting this out today because this is usually Christmas period. A lot of feast goes on in Igbo villages in this period. I expect anyone who comes across this to, when they travel home for Christmas or to the village, they should be asking questions. Ask the people in your communities. Let them tell you these things, because you owe it to yourself to at least know your genealogy. And may the Most High, the God of Abraham, the God of your ancestors, bless each and every one of you. Salam.